Human stood by an alien girl as her beacon failed, and her touch, when it returned, changed him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. John Mitchell was a man of reason. He spent most of his life surrounded by numbers, calculations, and the hum of machines. As a systems engineer at one of the largest aerospace companies in the country, he knew how to fix just about anything that required logic and precision. Yet, despite his expertise in engineering and technology, he found himself standing on the edge of a situation he couldn't quite explain. It was a quiet evening when it all started, with only the distant rustling of trees in the late autumn wind. John had decided to take a walk out in the woods behind his small apartment, a way to clear his mind after another long day of work. He had no idea that this walk would change his life forever. As he strolled along the familiar trail, John spotted something odd. Just ahead, there was a figure crouched by a large boulder. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the fading light, but as he got closer, he could see it more clearly. A young woman, or at least she looked like one. She had skin that shimmered in the soft moonlight, a pale shade of blue, almost like the sky just before dawn. Her eyes, wide and luminous, glowed in the dark, and there was an otherworldly presence about her that made John's heart race. He froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Was she a person in trouble, or something else entirely? "Are you okay?" he called out hesitantly, stepping closer. The figure turned, and when their eyes met, John felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, as if their souls had somehow connected. The woman, or rather the alien girl, looked at him with a mix of confusion and relief. Her voice, soft and melodic, barely rose above a whisper. I need help. My beacon, it failed." John didn't know what she meant, but the desperation in her voice urged him to act. "What do you need?" he asked, taking another step toward her. She looked down at the strange device in her hand, an object unlike anything he had ever seen, glowing faintly with a strange energy. It was clear that something was wrong. "I can't fix it. Without it, I can't return home," she said, her voice trembling. John's instinct was to help. He had no idea how to fix an alien device, but he couldn't leave her like this. "Let me take a look," he said, kneeling beside her. As he reached out to touch the device, the alien girl's hand brushed against his, sending a strange, electric shock through his body. His pulse quickened. It was as if something inside him had changed, subtly yet irrevocably. The moment their hands touched, he felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. Fear, confusion, longing, and something deeper, more intimate. A connection was made between them, something beyond understanding. John quickly brushed off the sensation, focusing on the task at hand. He had to fix this. But even as he examined the device, his mind kept drifting back to that touch. It had affected him in ways he couldn't explain. What was happening? And why did it feel like this moment was the beginning of something far more significant than either of them could imagine? John couldn't shake off the feeling that something was different. It wasn't just the strange woman in front of him, but the way his body had reacted when their hands touched. His pulse had quickened, and a sensation he couldn't describe had rippled through him. It was as if he was connected to her in some inexplicable way, like a part of him had been unlocked, something deep, almost primal. He focused back on the device in his hands. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had created, even in the most advanced aerospace laboratories. The strange glowing markings on the surface seemed to shift with his touch, responding to his every movement. "I don't know if I can fix it," John said, his voice filled with doubt. "This is beyond me." Elena's eyes, which had seemed so distant before, now locked onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "You can," she said softly, almost as if she believed it with a certainty that John could not fathom. "You have the potential." Her words hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he wondered if it was some kind of trick, if this was all a dream or a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But no, the touch, the connection, they felt too real. He glanced back at the device in his hands, still unsure how to proceed. How do you know I can do this? He asked. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not some alien engineer. Elena's expression softened. You may not know it, but you have the capability. You understand machines in a way that most humans do not. You see patterns. You feel them. John blinked, trying to understand what she meant. He had always been good at solving problems, but this was a whole different level. This was not just about gears and circuits. This was something otherworldly. Something deep inside him was telling him that she was right, that there was something inside him that could fix it. It wasn't just his mind, it was something deeper. He glanced up at her, searching her face for any sign that she was lying, but there was none. The urgency in her eyes was real. All right, John said, taking a deep breath. Let me try. He placed the device back on the ground and carefully started to examine it again. As his fingers brushed against the surface, he felt a strange warmth spreading through him, like an energy that wasn't his own. It was as though the device was alive, and it was reacting to him in ways he couldn't explain. Elena stood silently beside him, watching closely, her eyes never leaving him. John could feel her presence, her attention, wrapped around him, urging him on. Every motion, every adjustment to the device, seemed to draw him deeper into the unknown. As the minutes passed, John began to notice subtle changes. The device's glow intensified, and he could feel something inside it clicking into place, almost like a lock being turned. It was a strange, unfamiliar sensation, but it felt right. He didn't know how he knew what to do, but the more he worked on it, the more natural it felt. It was as if his mind and the device were communicating without words. Elena's voice broke through his concentration. You are doing it, she said, her tone full of wonder. John didn't respond. He was too focused on the task at hand, his mind completely absorbed in the process. And then, just as he thought he couldn't go any further, the device hummed. It wasn't loud, but it was a clear, distinct sound that filled the air. The glow shifted again, this time more powerfully, and then it flickered to a steady, bright pulse. John leaned back, staring at the now-functioning beacon. It had worked. Somehow he had fixed it. You did it, Elena said, her voice filled with awe. You fixed my beacon. John sat back on his heels, his hands still trembling slightly from the energy he'd just felt. He looked at Elena, who was staring at the beacon with a mixture of relief and gratitude. He was still trying to process what had just happened. Had he really fixed an alien device? And if so, how? The more he thought about it, the more he realized something. This wasn't just about fixing a broken machine. It was about something bigger, something he couldn't yet understand. Elena's gaze turned to him, her eyes softening with a strange emotion. You have changed everything, she said quietly. John didn't know what to say. The words felt inadequate for the enormity of what had just happened. But before he could respond, she stepped closer to him, and once again, their hands touched. This time, the sensation was different. It wasn't the shock of before, but a warmth that spread through his body, calming his racing heart. He could feel her emotions, her gratitude, and something else, something deeper, a bond forming between them, stronger than anything he'd ever experienced. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Elena pulled her hand back, her eyes searching his. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what you've done for me. John couldn't speak. He just stared at her, feeling something inside him shift. It was as if, in that brief moment, their connection had deepened beyond anything he could have imagined. He had helped her, but it felt like she had helped him, too. Changed him in ways he couldn't explain. He didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, everything felt possible. John sat back, staring at the beacon in disbelief. It was working, the strange device that had once been nothing more than a glowing enigma, now humming steadily in his hands. Elena, standing beside him, seemed to share in the moment of quiet triumph, though there was something more in her eyes, a depth of emotion that made him feel as though he'd just crossed some threshold he didn't fully understand. He could still feel the warmth of her touch lingering in his skin, a sensation that now felt almost like an invisible thread connecting them. I don't understand, John said, his voice low, almost to himself. How did I do that? Elena turned to him, her expression softening as she stepped closer. You didn't just fix it, John, she said, her voice carrying an unspoken weight. You unlocked something in yourself. Her words hung in the air between them, like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. What did she mean by that? He wasn't sure, but there was no denying that something inside him had shifted. There was a part of him, something deep, maybe even primal, that had responded to her, to the device, in ways he couldn't explain. The connection they had felt when their hands touched wasn't just physical. It felt spiritual, emotional, as if something ancient and profound had awakened in him. I don't know what you mean, he admitted, but I've never felt anything like that before. Elena looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. It's not just your mind, John. It's your heart, your soul. You've always had the potential. You just needed to see it, to feel it. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, but the words still didn't fully make sense. What did she know that he didn't? But I'm just a guy, he said, shaking his head. I'm not special. I don't know how any of this works. Elena smiled softly. That's the thing. You don't need to know how. You just need to trust that it's within you. And I think you're starting to. John's mind was racing. The idea that he had some latent potential, something beyond his engineering skills, was hard to grasp. But there was a part of him that couldn't ignore the way he had been able to connect with the device. It hadn't been like fixing a machine. It had been something far more intimate, as though the machine itself was alive, responding to him in a way that defied logic. Elena stepped back, giving him some space as she looked at the beacon in his hands. It's working, she said quietly. Thank you, John. You've done more than just fix the device. You've given me hope. Her words struck him deeply. He hadn't realized it before, but helping her, helping this mysterious, otherworldly being, had somehow changed him. It was more than just a sense of accomplishment. There was a part of him that felt fulfilled in a way he hadn't experienced before. He had been so focused on his work, his career, for so long. But this felt different. It felt like he had stepped into something much larger than himself. I didn't do it alone, John said, looking at her. You were the one who showed me how. Elena's eyes softened, and she gave a small nod. We did it together, she agreed. There was a long pause, the only sound the faint hum of the beacon. John felt a strange sense of peace settle over him, as if the air itself had shifted. They were still standing in the woods, in the quiet of the night, but something had changed between them. He wasn't sure where this would lead, what came next, but he knew that in this moment, everything felt different. You're not going back yet, are you? John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena looked at him, her gaze filled with something he couldn't quite decipher. No, she said softly. Not yet. The words hung between them, carrying the weight of something unspoken. John nodded, feeling a mix of emotions swirl inside him. He wasn't sure what to make of any of this, but he knew that he couldn't walk away from it. Not yet. Not when something had changed inside him. Not when something had changed between them. He didn't know what would happen next, or how their journey would unfold, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a man from Earth, and Elena was no longer just an alien. Together, they had crossed some invisible line, and whatever came next, they would face it together. John and Elena stood there in the quiet of the forest, the now functional beacon pulsing gently in John's hands. The air felt different, charged, almost, as if the world itself had shifted, in some subtle, profound way. For the first time in what felt like forever, John wasn't thinking about his work, his routine, or the pressures of his daily life. In this moment, with Elena beside him, everything seemed to fade into the background. Elena glanced at the sky, her eyes soft with something John couldn't quite place. You know, she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of sadness. This isn't where I belong. John looked at her, surprised. But you just got the beacon working. You're going home, right? Elena hesitated, the weight of her words heavy in the air. I should be. But it's not that simple. She turned to face him fully, her gaze steady, yet filled with an unspoken depth. I've been away from my people for so long, John. The journey, the time. I've changed. And in a way, I think I was hoping this would be easier. But it's not. The longer I stay here, the more I feel disconnected. John frowned, sensing the complexity of what she was saying. You don't have to go back if you don't want to, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. I mean, if you're still unsure about it, you don't have to make a decision right now. You've already been through so much. Elena smiled faintly, a hint of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, John. Your kindness. It's something I haven't encountered in a long time. John shrugged, feeling a bit awkward under the weight of her words. I'm just trying to help, he said, glancing at the beacon in his hands. But if you're not ready to go back, then maybe you should stay a little longer. Elena seemed to contemplate this for a moment, her eyes drifting to the horizon, as though considering something much larger than the conversation they were having. I never thought I would feel this way, she said, almost to herself. I didn't think I could connect with someone like this, a human. But now, I'm not so sure. John felt his heart skip a beat, but he didn't know how to respond. The connection between them was undeniable, something that had grown between them without either of them fully realizing it. In a way, he understood her hesitation. Her world was light years away, and here, with him, it felt like they were existing in an impossible space, a place between two realities, neither fully here nor there. You don't have to explain, John said quietly. I get it. Elena looked back at him, her gaze searching, as though looking for something in his eyes. Do you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded, feeling an unexpected weight settle in his chest. Yeah, he said, feeling the truth of it in his bones. I think I do. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was an understanding now, something unspoken but very real. John wasn't sure what would happen next. He wasn't sure if Elena would decide to stay longer, or if she would go back to her world, where she truly belonged. But in this moment, it didn't seem to matter. What mattered was that they had found something meaningful in each other, a connection that neither of them had anticipated, but which had changed both of their lives in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The night deepened around them, and John found himself wanting to hold on to this moment forever, before everything changed. Elena turned to him again, her expression thoughtful. I need to make a decision soon, she said softly. But I think I need to understand more about this place. About you. About what this is between us. John nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. I understand, he said. And when you're ready, we'll figure it out. Elena smiled, the warmth of it reaching her eyes. Thank you, she said. For everything. They stood there for a long while, the quiet of the forest around them broken only by the soft rustling of the leaves. Neither of them spoke, but there was no need. In that moment, they both understood. The journey ahead was unknown, but they would face it together, whatever it might bring. As the days passed, the strange sense of connection between John and Elena deepened. It was subtle at first, like a thread weaving itself between them, invisible but undeniable. They spent more time together, walking through the forest surrounding John's small apartment, talking about everything and nothing. John found himself sharing parts of his life with Elena that he had never told anyone before, his childhood, his dreams, his fears. There was a comfort in her presence, an unspoken understanding that made him feel like he could be himself, something he hadn't truly felt in years. For Elena, the human world was still an enigma. Every day was filled with new discoveries, from the simplest things like the way trees seemed to sway in the breeze to the more complex, like the subtle emotions that humans seemed to hide behind their words and actions. She was fascinated by John, not just because he had helped her, but because of the way he seemed to grasp the complexity of the world around him. She had never encountered a human like him before, someone so open, yet so guarded. Despite the growing bond, Elena knew that she couldn't stay in this limbo forever. The beacon she had repaired was still active, and it was only a matter of time before her people would come looking for her. But every time she thought about leaving, she hesitated. There was something about this place, something about John, that made her feel torn. I need to make a choice, Elena said one evening as they sat on the edge of a small creek, the sound of the water bubbling gently in the background. I know, John replied quietly, his gaze fixed on the stars above them. But I don't want to rush you. Take your time. Elena turned to him, her expression serious. I'm afraid that if I leave, I'll never understand what this is. What we have. John felt his chest tighten at her words, a strange mix of longing and fear stirring inside him. What if you stayed? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What if you stayed here with me? Elena looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet uncertainty. I don't belong here, John, she said softly. I was never meant to stay. My people are waiting for me. I can't abandon them. But you're not abandoning them, John said, his voice gentle but firm. You're choosing something for yourself. You deserve that. You deserve to figure out what makes you happy. Elena's gaze softened, and for a moment, John saw a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, a mixture of hope and fear, as if she was seeing the world through a new lens. "And what about you?" she asked quietly. "What about what makes you happy?" John took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her question. He had never really thought about it that way before. He had spent so much of his life focusing on work, on surviving, that he had never stopped to ask himself what he wanted. "I guess," he said slowly, "I'm still figuring that out too." Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe we can figure it out together," she said softly. John smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him at her words. He didn't know what the future held, or whether Elena would choose to stay or go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like there was hope. Hope for something beyond the routine of his life. As they sat there, the cool night air wrapping around them, John realized that it wasn't about finding the right answer or making the perfect choice. It was about being present, about sharing this moment with someone who understood him in a way no one else ever had. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. Things would never be the same. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what he needed. The days seemed to stretch on endlessly, with John and Elena moving through them together, each one bringing new layers to their connection. Though the decision loomed over them like a dark cloud, neither of them seemed ready to face it. They had settled into a quiet rhythm, John showing Elena more of the world she had never seen, and Elena sharing the small, fragile truths of her existence. It was in these moments, walking through forests, gazing at the stars, and sharing silence, that John realized how much he had come to care for her. But even with this growing bond, the questions remained. What would happen when Elena had to decide? Could she truly stay, or was her place in the stars, among people who had waited for her for so long? "You've shown me so much, John," Elena said one evening, sitting on a log beside a crackling fire. "The stars here, they look so different from the ones on my planet. I thought I would never see them again." John smiled, watching the flames dance in the firelight. "There's something magical about them, isn't there?" he said. "Sometimes, I think we're all just stardust, trying to find our way back to where we belong." Elena's gaze shifted from the fire to the sky above. "Do you ever wonder if we're all just passing through? That maybe we don't really belong anywhere?" John's heart caught at her words. He had felt that way, too, for a long time. His life had been a series of routines, moments that passed by without any real meaning. But now, with Elena beside him, everything had changed. "I think maybe we belong where we find peace," John said, his voice low. Elena met his eyes, her expression thoughtful. "And what if that peace isn't where we expect it to be?" John didn't have an answer to that. He couldn't deny that something had shifted between them, an understanding, a quiet connection that was impossible to ignore. But peace was a fragile thing, and he didn't know if they could truly find it together. The night grew colder, and the fire flickered in the dark. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena spoke first. "I need to leave," she said softly. "I don't know if I can stay here any longer." John's chest tightened at her words. He had known this moment was coming, but hearing it out loud felt like a blow. "I understand," he said, though the words tasted bitter. "You've got your people, your life." Elena nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "It's not just that. It's everything. I've seen so much, felt so much, and now I don't know if I belong anywhere anymore." John didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell her that she belonged with him, that they could figure it out together, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, the simple act of contact sending a rush of warmth through him. "Whatever you decide, Elena," he said quietly, "I'll support you. You don't have to do this alone." She squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with something he couldn't read. "Thank you, John," she whispered. "You've given me more than I ever thought I could have." The fire crackled between them, but the world around them felt still. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the quiet hum of their connection. In that silence, it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. John didn't know what the future held. He didn't know what Elena would choose, or where her journey would take her. But in that moment, as their fingers intertwined, he knew one thing for certain. No matter where she went, or what decision she made, they had shared something real, something that neither of them would ever forget. The next morning, the air felt heavier, like it was holding its breath in anticipation. John woke up to the soft rustling of leaves outside his window, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the trees. It was a peaceful morning, but there was a weight in the air that told him the moment he had been dreading was near. He knew that Elina had been wrestling with her decision, but he hadn't expected it to be this hard. The uncertainty was tangible, both for her and for him. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at him the night before, the way her eyes seemed to search for something beyond the decision she was about to make. She was standing at the window when he walked into the room, gazing out at the forest, her silhouette bathed in the soft morning light. She turned to him when she heard his footsteps, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if the weight of their unspoken thoughts hung between them, keeping them both silent. "John," Elina said quietly, her voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about what you said. About staying." John felt his heart race a little at her words. He had hoped she would stay, but he wasn't sure if he was ready to hear it from her. "Elina," he began, his voice unsure, "you don't have to make a decision just because of me. I don't want to pressure you. I know you have your own life, your own people, but I also know that you've changed my life in ways I can't even explain. I don't want to lose that." Elina met his gaze, and there was something in her eyes that made his words feel heavier, more real. She took a deep breath and slowly walked toward him. "I never thought I would feel this way," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I would come to care for someone like this. But, John, I've realized something. I've realized that I don't just want to go back to the stars. I want to understand this. Understand what's here, with you, with the world I never knew." John's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what this meant, but he knew it was important. It was the first time Elina had truly opened up about what she was feeling. She was giving him something he hadn't expected, her vulnerability, her heart. "Elina," he whispered, unsure of what to say. Elina reached out and gently took his hand, her touch sending a spark of warmth through him. "I don't know if I can stay forever," she said softly, "but I know that right now, this moment with you, it means everything to me. I need time to understand who I am in this world. And maybe, in time, I can figure out what that means." John squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with a mix of hope and uncertainty. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like the future was something they could face together. "Take all the time you need," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here, and I'll be here, no matter what you decide." Elina smiled, and in that moment, John saw a glimpse of the person she was becoming, a person who was no longer defined by the past, but by the choices she was making in the present. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything unsaid. And in that silence, surrounded by the soft glow of the morning light, they both understood. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like the path forward was theirs to walk together, side by side. The weeks that followed were a quiet kind of peace, the kind that settles in when two people, two souls, have reached a place of understanding. John and Elina spent their days together, exploring the world in ways neither of them had imagined. They ventured into town, where Elina marveled at the simplest human inventions, from the sound of traffic to the flickering lights in the streets at night. John was amazed by how quickly she adapted, how she picked up on the subtle details of human life with a sharpness that made him wonder what other things she might understand. At night, they would sit outside, under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. Elina began to share more about her own world, the planet she had come from, the life she had left behind. She spoke of her people, the distant civilizations that existed far from Earth, and the technology that allowed her to travel across galaxies. But even as she shared, there was something in her voice that told John she was not entirely at peace with where she had come from. "It's strange," she said one evening, her voice soft in the cool air. "I never realized how different it would feel to leave. I thought I would find a place in the stars, a place where I could belong. But now I see that there's something more. Something I didn't know I was missing." John watched her closely, sensing the depth of her words. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Elina turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "It's the connection," she said, as though the answer had been with her all along. "The connection to people, to the world. I never understood how much I would need that, how much I would need to feel grounded. John felt a lump form in his throat as he listened. It was strange how, in such a short time, they had both become so important to each other. They had shared something that neither of them could fully explain, something that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. And in that moment, John realized that he, too, had changed. He had never thought of his life in the way Elena described it, as a search for connection. But now, with her, everything felt different. I think I get it, John said slowly. I've spent most of my life just existing, doing the same things over and over. But now, with you here, I feel like I'm actually living. It's strange, but I'm starting to see the world through different eyes. Elena smiled, and for a moment, John saw something in her expression, something that made him feel like they were both standing on the edge of a new chapter. I don't know where this will lead, she said softly, but I know that I want to keep learning. About this place, about you, about myself. John nodded, his heart swelling with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He didn't know what the future held for them. He didn't know if Elena would stay forever, or if she would eventually return to the stars, where she truly belonged. But he also knew that this moment, the one they were sharing right now, was something special. It was a moment that neither of them would forget, no matter what came next. Whatever happens, John said, his voice steady, I'm glad we're in this together. Elena reached out, her hand gently brushing his. Me too, she whispered. And for the first time, John believed that maybe, just maybe, the path ahead wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. Whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, taking each step as it came, with open hearts and open minds. Weeks turned into months, and as time passed, John and Elena found themselves more intertwined in each other's lives. Elena had come to embrace the human world in a way that was both exhilarating and difficult for her. She was learning new things every day, from how people communicated in subtle ways to the little routines that made life feel familiar and safe. The more she observed, the more she realized how much she had underestimated the complexity of human life. Yet, despite the small steps she took in understanding, something inside her still pulled her toward the stars. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, Elena admitted one evening, her voice soft as she gazed up at the night sky. If I stayed here, with you, am I giving up everything I've ever known? John sat beside her, his eyes focused on the constellations above them. The night was quiet, but there was a tension between them, a question that hung in the air. I don't think it's about giving up anything, he said quietly. It's about finding something new, something that feels right. Elena turned to him, her eyes searching his face. What if what feels right isn't enough? What if the answer isn't here? John felt the weight of her words, a knot forming in his chest. He had never imagined that this moment would come, this moment when she would question her choice to stay. I don't know, he admitted. But maybe it's not about having all the answers. Maybe it's just about being here, with me, right now. Together. Elena looked at him, her expression thoughtful. Together, she repeated softly, as if tasting the word for the first time. The thought of her leaving again was a painful one, but he knew that he couldn't keep her if she wasn't ready to stay. What mattered now was what they shared, this space between them that had grown into something real. You don't have to decide now, John continued, his voice steady. We can figure this out, one step at a time. And if you need to go back, I'll understand. But whatever happens, I want you to know that this, what we have, is real. It's something worth holding on to. Elena smiled then, a small, almost wistful smile that made John's heart ache. You've given me more than I ever expected, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. More than I thought I could have. And maybe that's enough, for now. They sat in silence, the only sound the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. In that moment, John understood something fundamental. It wasn't about the future or the uncertainties that lay ahead. It wasn't about the impossible decision Elena had to make between two worlds. What mattered was that, in this moment, they had found something neither of them had expected, something beautiful, something real. And whatever came next, whether they stayed or whether Elena eventually returned to the stars, that connection would remain. It would always be theirs. As the night stretched on, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if reflecting the bond between them, a bond that defied the distances of time and space. And for the first time, John felt at peace, knowing that whatever the future held, He and Elena had already found something truly extraordinary, something that no distance could take away.